Some news from you all. The Times, the greatest newspaper in the world, has just broken a story concerning the Conservative MP, Scott Benton. The report claims Mr Benton was prepared to help business interests influence policymakers and provide access to behind-the-scenes information. What you probably haven't read is that the Times, in fact, ran an attempted sting operation on a great GB News friend, the incorruptible Mr Philip Davies. But he and GB News Investigates reporter Charlie Peters saw right through it and out-stung the sting. We've asked the Times for comment. They haven't responded, but they can get in touch if they want to, as they know it doesn't cost much to keep in touch. But Charlie Peters reported earlier.
It's always a gamble when a newspaper decides to launch an undercover sting, particularly when it involves Westminster MPs. Conservative politicians are particularly under the spotlight, with Matt Hancock, Kwasi Kwarteng and other high-profile Tories recently caught out asking for eye-watering sums for consulting work. Today it was revealed that Tory MP Scott Benton had been stung by an undercover operation from the Times. The MP for Blackpool South was caught on camera, seemingly ready to support an investment fund to influence policymakers and obtain gambling policy information, despite rules blocking MPs for lobbying for cash. But we can reveal how the Times operation failed to ensnare another backbench Tory and GB News presenter Philip Davies. And the GB News Investigates team caught them on camera. After he was approached, Mr Davies contacted the GB News Investigates team, thinking something fishy was going on. Tar Partners, the fake firm who snared Benton and who had approached him too, purported to be an investment firm for an Indian multi-millionaire family. But it was not what it seemed. GB News visited what they claimed were their offices and found no trace of them. Their office landline went to an overflow company who'd only started taking calls in the last week. The cover was sloppy to say the least. The man who reached out to Mr Davies, William Kent, had a suspicious LinkedIn profile. He turned out to be a senior journalist at the Times. GB News Investigates also uncovered that his colleague Alamu, supposedly the niece of the multi-millionaire Indian businessman, was also a Times journalist. In their conversation with Mr Davies, the MP for Keighley, the investigative journalists from the Times said that in India, the rules for lobbying politicians were different, and they were trying to bring that system here.
Working there for many decades, and relationships have always been quite an important part of how he works, which is kind of why we usually try and strip out the middleman essentially, and just kind of we look for people that have their finger on the pulse but are happy to kind of within what they're allowed to do, just kind of give us a bit of a heads up of what's coming up, you know, what areas are helpful for us to look into and find people to bring on. So we're just trying to get an idea of how things work here essentially politically and what you can and can't do really. Thanks for fitting us in.
Benton, who says he had only agreed to the fake firm to find out what the role entailed, might have fallen foul of the sting. But in the case of our very own Phil Davies, they couldn't sting the stingers.
So much for coming in. You have stung the stingers, but do you think this type of journalism is fair and is actually beneficial to try and keep the British body politic honest?
I think so, yes, because I think it exposes behaviours from politicians when they don't realise they're being exposed. I mean, investigative journalism of this sort is very useful, but I suppose my intention here, after I realised that I was dealing with a sting, was to try and, I don't know, through criticism, improve the process. I mean, I thought the LinkedIn profile was sloppy, the lack of office was really lazy, and the overflow firm, they were very delighted to tell me that they'd only started taking calls a week ago. So there is definitely a space for this kind of journalism. I have to say, at the time, when I first saw the story, I thought they were legitimate originally. I thought the story I was going to sting there, possibly, going to that hotel, was that I really was going to encounter someone trying to bend the rules.
Oh, so you thought that you might find a crooked company that was trying to suborn MPs and then found that it was actually a sting?
We were almost certain that it was a sting, but the remote chance of 5% that it could be something legitimate made it even more exciting.
And will you be looking to do other stings? Are you going to be the GB News stinger?
GB News Investigates exists for this reason and for these kind of stories, so absolutely we'll keep an eye out on these things. And I think we also should pay attention to the excellent work that the Times has done here in luring some MPs into trying to bend the rules in some way. And, you know, Scott Benton has issued a defence that we covered in that report, but still, I think they've really exposed something great there.
Well, I'm very pleased that Philip Davies is able to join us. Philip, you're modelling yourself on Lot, the one just man who had to be found in the cities of the plain. What did you feel about it when you discovered that you were being set up, and what alerted you to the sting?
Well, I received an email from this company purporting to be an Indian company wanting to invest in the UK, and it smelt fishy to me, to be honest, Jacob. The whole thing didn't smell right. They were trying to invest certain sums of money, which, in the scheme of things, wasn't actually a fat lot. But they wanted somebody who would be able to advise them on regulation of this and regulation of that. It didn't ring true. And so I contacted Charlie and said, look, I think this is something. This is some kind of fake company, I think, or some kind of sting. And, you know, as journalists, I thought it was interesting to go along and see the kind of tactics that they employed when carrying out this kind of activity.
And do you think it's fair for newspapers to act as agent provocateur?
Yeah, I think it's. I've got mixed feelings about it, Jacob, to be honest. I mean, yes, of course, you know, the media's there to hold us to account. And I certainly don't complain about them doing that. They're there to try and expose wrongdoing and all the rest of it. But look, I mean, it's a pretty grubby tactic. I mean, it's not as if people are doing this. It's not as if they have heard that somebody is doing something wrong and they want to then try and expose them for doing something wrong. They're trying to catch out people who, to the best of everybody's knowledge, have never done anything wrong, and try to get them to do something wrong. And I, you know, I don't know whether that's a legitimate tactic or not. I'm sure most people think it is, but you know, I've got mixed feelings about it myself.
And how much malpractice do you think there is in Westminster at the moment? Do you think that the two stings we've had recently are showing that we are back to the bad old days of the 1990s, or with the new approach to standards that we've had, are we in a much better place than we were then?
I think, Jacob, and I would like to think you would feel the same, that we've got the most honest, incorruptible politics in the whole of the world. And I think sometimes we take that too much for granted. And so, you know, I still maintain that that politics in the UK is very, very clean and honest and straightforward. If there is any wrongdoing, I think it is very, very minor in very, very exceptional cases. But look, that's no defence for the people who do things wrong. They should be exposed, and that's what journalists are there for. But I do think that the politics in the UK is probably the straightest in the world.
Well, thanks very much, Philip. Actually, when my father was editor of the Times, he approved a sting operation, so I certainly think that journalists are entitled to do it and to keep our politics clean.